Every year, you have a choice. One that says staying independent and family-owned means something on your farm. So plant your independence. Plant Wivels.
Success in farming is all about precision and efficiency, ensuring every seed, every drop of water, every nutrient and treatment counts. Terraplex Ag is helping farmers all over Iowa and the Midwest do just that. With precision ag drone technology and support from Terraplex, you'll boost your productivity and make timely and informed decisions, all while reducing your costs and increasing your profit. It's time to revolutionize your farming. Harvest the benefits with Terraplex Ag. Visit TerraplexAg.com.
Chris Williams, Brent Blum, from the Wild Rose Casino Studio. It's Williams and Blum, presented by Mechdyne, on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network.
What is up? Welcome to the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network on a Sunday night. Chris Williams, Brent Blum with you. We are recording, full disclosure, about an hour before the Iowa State women's game. We did that strategically so we could watch that game, followed by, can I say our Minnesota Vikings?
I'm like halfway in. Like, I'm not all the way in.
You just do this, though, because you're like, if they win, you want to take joy in it, but if they lose, you want to be able to say, they're not really my team.
That's actually exactly right.
Yeah. I'm not stupid.
I've told the story. When you grew up an Iowa State fan in the 90s, it's hard to have an NFL team, specifically ones with bad luck, because
Understood.
You don't like getting kicked in the nuts twice in a weekend.
Yeah, no, I get you. So that's why we wanted to be able to watch both of those games, and we wouldn't have time to do both right after the women's game. So there will be no commentary on that women's game. We'll hit on them Wednesday for the Wednesday pod. We'll also just do a full recap of the Utah game because that'll take place the night before we record. We are presented, as always, by Mechdyne, MECHDYNE.com. Enabling discovery. New year, new you. Maybe you hate your job. Perhaps you should call up our friends at Mechdyne. They're always hiring Iowa Staters. We are in the Wild Rose Casino Studios, tipping back on a nice glass of Cody Road would sound really good right now. It's freaking cold.
It is cold.
As it is outside. Florida a week ago at this point. That sounds pretty darn good right now. But Hilton Coliseum was awesome on Saturday. Iowa State rolls a top 25 team. It was never even a contest. We'll get into all that. Larry Eustachy and that 99-2000 team kind of steals the show in what you would expect. We have a text chain with one of our best friends, Brant, who, without a doubt, is Larry Eustachy's biggest fan.
No doubt.
Our friend, mutual friend of mine, Blooms, flew from Georgia to be able to be in the same room as Larry Eustachy. Got his picture with him. There are a lot of nostalgic guys like him, but also my favorite part of it is just it felt like some healing has taken place after
For sure.
20 years or so. This is a cool story, a cool redemption story. One that, full disclosure, and I'm sorry if this makes me a bad Cyclone. It's just I wasn't around then, and I wasn't an Iowa State fan then, so I never really had these feelings like you guys do towards Larry. But I've gotten to know him. He came on our show a little over a year ago. Talked to him multiple times since, and I really like him. I'm really rooting for him to do well, and it was really cool to see all those smiles and special moment. I know you were there. Did you take Everett? I think you took Everett.
Yeah.
What was it like for you being one of the Larry disciples from the late 90s?
Well, it was just really cool. I mean, my 6-year-old had no clue. And it's hard to even explain. It's like, well, this is like
back in the day we didn't have the internet, and all we did was watch these games. Yeah.
I was like, that team, those two teams were such a big part of my childhood. And Chris, you don't really realize it until they're back, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, and the memories start rolling back of all the times going to Hilton with my dad, watching those teams or watching on TV. When you're right, I mean, thankfully, Iowa State basketball games were on TV. Iowa State basketball games were on TV more than football. And quite honestly, Iowa State basketball was better than the football team, so I grew up more of a basketball fan. And that those two teams were a big reason why. And I didn't know all the drama. Now you read about it now, and you're like, man, how would I have handled that?
Yeah.
I'm just glad that Larry got that redeeming moment, because there's some places where that's not possible, where there's too many hard feelings on one side or another, and it never happens. And I'm so glad it happened. I was just smiling ear to ear the whole game. It looked like Larry was as well. I mean, that picture, C-Dub, of him in between Walters and Heft was awesome.
Iconic.
Because I grew up listening when he was on with Pete and Eric in post game. That was must listen to stuff.
And that was an era where, like, the coaches show on Monday night was must listen radio. And you'd stay up on Sunday and watch the cable TV show.
Yep.
Like, do they even do those anymore? Rod and Jeff, like, they were.
There still is a Campbell. Yeah, there still is a Campbell show. I don't know if there's an Ott show, and if it's even.
But I guess the greater point I'm making is how big of a deal those were back in the late 90s. You'd stay up until 10:35 on a Sunday night to watch the Johnny Orr show or whatever it was at the time. Like, see, it was just different. It's hard to describe to the younger generation.
I was doing some math when I was up there. I'm like, man, that when he got let go, that was 22 years ago. When we were in college, and let's say 2005, 22 years before that, C-Dub would have been 1983. Like, that would have seemed like centuries ago when I was in college. But yet, it's the fun part for me is hopefully some of the younger generation looking back into those eras and realizing, how good that team was, and what that team meant to a lot of us. Because to me, that paved the pathway. Up until that point, I did not believe Iowa State could ever win a championship in men's basketball or football. That team changed that for me, and it's honestly why I'm still bullish today and optimistic, maybe more so now than I ever have been, even with that team, with this current team. And I thought that was the beauty of it, is you had arguably, my opinion, the best chance for a team to make a Final Four since that one. Now, again, Hoiberg had some great teams. Obviously, TJ's team last year was really good. But I believe Iowa State basketball's in the same stratosphere as those two teams under Larry right now. And I think it's the first time you could say that.
I was thinking about that watching the game, just the coincidence of doing it. It just happening to do it when, which team is better? I don't have the perspective
I did a poll. I did a
poll
on Twitter.
Okay. What did you find?
And it was 60-40. This current team won the poll, but I still vote until proven otherwise for that 99-2000.
Well,
team.
and the perspective of it, I saw Chris Felica tweeted something, friend of the program.
Yes.
The perspective on that team too, I think you have to take into account how they were seated and sent to Auburn Hills, because how history remembers that team is that they lost in the Elite Eight, but for really some criminal seating, like somebody should have gone to prison for that. The more you learn about it, that team really should have been a Final Four team at the very least, and it probably should have been a Final Two team.
Well, and then
playing Michigan State.
And go back, if you guys go look at Wikipedia, that 2000 NCAA tournament bracket, the whole thing was open. There was two top, I think, 4 teams left, top 16 seeds total in the Elite Eight, and it was those 2 teams. The whole thing got busted everywhere else, and so literally Iowa State and Michigan State were the only 2 remaining top-ranked teams. And the other teams that made the Final Four, I think it was an 8 seed in Wisconsin, I believe a 5 seed in Florida, if my memory serves. But yeah, the whole thing was wide open, and that's what I hope it was almost providential in that the team that finally does make a Final Four for Iowa State and what could be this year, had that team in the house to celebrate a 25th anniversary. I mean, it would just like it would be all things coming together at one time. And I was just glad for Larry and those players. I'm also honestly I'm glad Paul Shirley got a nice reception. I was curious because obviously he and Larry's have discussions, but those two, it sounds
Well, we
like
asked Larry about him on our show.
Yep. And
it was kind of weird, like because Paul, I have interviewed Paul when he does book releases.
yes.
He'll often hit me up and we'll talk about the book. And I had him on KXNO once. God, I don't remember. It was his last book or 2 books ago or whatever. And he couldn't have been nastier with what he had to say. And I'm not judging anyone. There was my point on the healing, right? Like there were hard feelings throughout the whole thing. I was glad he came back. I was a little concerned that he wouldn't be there.
Well, and a little behind the scenes stuff. He was the player that organized the whole thing.
Oh, cool.
It was him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. That makes me very happy because I like him.
And I know some people wonder where were Jamal and Marcus. I believe Marcus had a funeral he had to attend
Marcus
to.
said that on his podcast that he does with our friends at Three Beards.
3 Beards. Okay.
Yeah.
And
he did. They put that clip out and I saw that. Yeah. Marcus had a guy from his hometown who was instrumental in his childhood passed away, unfortunately.
And I don't know what the story with Jamal was, but I'm just glad because, that was hard. That was a hard era on those guys. And I hope for the coming back there, getting to Hilton for the first time for a lot of them in a long time was healing. And also to see Iowa State just completely dismantle Baylor like it's 2000 again was pretty cool as well.
Alan Lazard just got in the end zone, by the way.
There we go.
Good. Little good vibes
Let's go.
for Cyclone football. Okay, so Larry comes back. We'll get to the game and talk Big 12 basketball
by
here.
the way, our goal is to get Larry back on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to send that
right?
text.
Right.
I'm going to because I think that'd be really cool. And I also a lot has changed in 15 months since we talked to him last.
For sure.
Because
Including
this
his hair.
was kind of a dream, right? Yeah, his hair looked great, by the way. But this was kind of a dream at the time.
Yes.
And I think that he was very open to it. And if people remember, he was reaching out to us to come on the show, which was just a dream come true to us. And we're like, of course, tell us when. We'll do it, Sir Larry.
Sir Larry's like, don't call me sir.
And then it happened. So really special. Good job. I know Mike Green.
Mike Green from the letter winners. Again, he came on, and the cool thing, C-Dub, I do think that helped start a conversation within the fan base. Now, was Iowa State going to do something for that team anyway? I
do know at the time it was not planned.
Yes, it was not planned.
It was being kicked around, and Larry was so gracious when he was on with us, and so just kind. And I don't know. I hope it helped. I hope it did.
I did too. I hope so. And I'm glad it happened. And it was really neat to see.
How was your dad? Did you talk to your dad about it?
Yeah.
Some of the old timers, I'd like to know what they think.
And it's just, I think I'm glad for them because everyone was still. That was one of the few marks in Iowa State that wasn't the best, and I'm just glad you can kind of bury the hatch a little bit on that era. And it happened. Larry blames himself. He had some amazing quotes while he was back, saying they turned my office into a bar.
I saw that,
which was hilarious. And then he also, our friend Matt took a photo, friend Matty Newts, and Larry had his arm around him, and Larry told him while he was taking the photo, last time I had an arm around somebody like this in a photo, I got fired for it. But no, so
at least you can have fun with it.
Yeah, he just has fun with it. And I've heard he was awesome, and those guys had a good night last night and the night before, and just very, very happy it happened.
Iowa State whoops Baylor's ass. We'll get to that here in just a couple of minutes.
That was enjoyable too.
Colin Newell's an ass kicker when it comes to selling when it comes to insurance. I can promise you that. Saved me $1,000 last year. It's done Bloom the same. He can do the same for you. For real, a lot of people thinking about their finances this time of year. Give our guy Colin Newell at Farm Bureau Financial Services a call. That's Colin, with one L, Newell. Takes all my insurance now. I moved everything over to him. Also, new year, new you, and perhaps that is going back to school. I want to remind you of the Ivy College of Business. They're a fantastic graduate program that Bloom is very familiar with, worked with them and for them for a very long time. We appreciate their sponsorship. Dean Spalding, Michelle, all the great people at the Ivy College of Business at Iowa State. And Cyclone Fanatic Shop. We just got a note right before we came on from Mike Martz that and this is one where I hope in the new era we can keep doing cool stuff like this. I think we'll be able to.
Yeah.
But we've been doing these team shirts with with you guys partnering together the last 2 years, and major hits with my family during Christmas. By the way, kids, nieces and nephews love getting these team shirts with the cartoon characters. Kyle Starsevich does a great job drawing those for us. We have restocked those as of Monday. So if you wanted one and couldn't get one, completely restocked, CycloneFanaticShop.com. You're also contributing to funding the entire team. Everybody gets a cut out of that. And a bunch of new NIL player stuff started shipping last week, like the presidents and all those cool shirts that we've done. So go to CycloneFanaticShop.com. The new team shirts, and I would get one. I hope people are like collecting these. Is kind of like what
it's for. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. All the NIL shirts that we've done, that'll be a cool like quilt for somebody to make someday.
Well, I talked to
starting with like Kyle Kempt. I think he was our first one.
There you go. I was up there at Hilton and I saw somebody with, because I have the same shirt, the 2000. They used to do these road tours after the game to make a little money, or after the seasons, and so they'd go around and do little scrimmages against local teams and get paid a little bit. And anyway, they made these shirts, and I collected all of them, just
awesome.
The seniors. So I have the one from Fred and Lauren Meyer and Yulo. I've got the one with Dedrick Willoughby, R.I.P., Kenny Pratt, Kelvin Cato, and then the one from 2000 as well.
I can't believe Willoughby's gone.
I know.
That's wild.
It's crazy. But yeah, those things can be collector's items, especially if this team is as good as we think it's going to be. Holy smokes, you won't be able to get a shirt like that ever again.
Yeah. I was thinking about that yesterday. They're really good, man. Like I was scrambling. When I do these post-game pods, I don't like to just be like, well, we're the best team in the world. Nobody can beat us. Because you want to give like real analysis, right?
Yep.
And it's hard to find a weakness right now with what Iowa State is doing. I think maybe for a while it was like the interior defense, switches, maybe a little late, like all that. Right now, the way that they're playing, it really is difficult to find a weakness with this Iowa State team.
Yeah, and I thought
with Chatfield, especially in his emergence,
he's been great. And when Momcilovic is making shots like he was, it's like good luck. I thought defensively Iowa State was really good. Now Iowa State benefited quite a bit. Baylor missed a lot. I mean,
correct, no doubt.
That's a Baylor team that is not going to shoot that poorly. Again, a lot of that was Iowa State making them uncomfortable, getting them the shots that they don't want to take, and that's some contested threes with Omir, and Iowa State forced them into that. But right now, C-Dub, I agree. I thought Iowa State played a B game. Like, it wasn't a great game.
But you still win by 20, almost 30 at one point. You let Baylor have that run at the end, but it wasn't that close.
You got it. Only forced 8 turnovers. It's not like they were, real crazy with forcing turnovers. I thought Baylor did a nice job of handling the ball. Iowa State turns it over 12 times, which is a little bit above their season average, but still not competitive. And it was dominant. And it just, the neat part is, and even Scott Drew addressed this after the game, he's like, they can beat you in so many different ways that they couldn't before. It was interesting. Milan was on the Jeff Goodman late podcast last night, and he said some really interesting things of basically like, last year our bigs just couldn't do a whole lot, from a scoring standpoint. And now we can, and it just changes the whole dynamic. And literally, this team is playing about as well as possible. I guess the concern is, do you peak too early? And, you never know with injuries and everything, but Iowa State's got all the pieces. You look across college basketball, and I think it's a pretty consensus. Iowa State's the top 3 team. It's Tennessee, it's Auburn, it's Iowa State. That'll change. Teams are going to get better. You saw what Kansas did today after losing this week. They just completely destroyed UCF by 40. So they're going to get better, right? And I think Kansas will be a factor in the Big 12. But right now, Iowa State is legit number 1 seed. And I've never been able to say that before confidently, that Iowa State is a number 1 seed. And with some losses going up here, Iowa State's got one on, or with other teams, there is a world where Iowa State could be the number 1 ranked team in the country at some point. I really believe that here. If some losses go Iowa State's way and Iowa State keeps it rolling. You look at Ken Palm now, C-Dub. Iowa State's predicted record, keep in mind 20 games in the Big 12 this year. Now 16-4. But
that would be a 1 seed.
Yes, and there is only one projected loss on there from a seeding standpoint, and that is at Houston. So,
which they're coming on to. People look at their 3 losses and it's completely skewed.
Good.
Like they lost to good teams and early, and they're killing people now.
They're a monster.
They just destroyed BYU over the weekend, and BYU's not bad.
That's the thing. It's like I think Iowa State can be a 1 seed and not win the league.
Yeah. Well, that's what we said preseason. It's like, what are you going to be picked 3rd or 4th and be a 1 or a 2 seed in the tournament?
My other takeaway was I know Baylor had some guys out. I don't see it with them. I don't see them being a factor at all. They don't have enough. They didn't have enough skill and size. I like Omier. I like the edge Kumpkin. He's going to be a great NBA player, but man, they are a level below everybody else in that top tier in the country. And picked Iowa State 22nd. I hope Matt Norlander's reconsidering that now.
Glad you brought up Momcilovic. I guess that was my biggest takeaway after that game. He's been good this year. He hasn't been bad. There's also been a weird kind of thing that it's not weird within the program, but I'm always getting asked about it by fans is about when Heisey will come in and they're doing the matchup thing. Right?
Yep.
And there's been a lot of these big wins where Milan has kind of been the guy on the bench at the end of the game, where it's not really indicative of his role. It's just more matchup driven. And him going 4 of 7 from 3, which I think he's 44% on the year. So we're not talking about a guy who's been slumping. Okay. Like it's not like he's been bad, but I also feel like if Iowa State's going to be at the level you're talking about, where you're legit playing for a national championship, to have that killer on the wing like Milan shooting that way is imperative, right? And just want to see him get going. And he's not going to do that every game, but you're just so much more difficult to defend when he's playing like that. So to me, like of all the positive things to take from yesterday, that was the biggest thing that I had.
For sure. And I thought defensively, he was really good. He was really good yesterday too, which he's gotten so much better. If you go from midway last year to now, it's an immense improvement. And there's still a ways to go for him. Again, in that Goodman Up podcast, he said literally, TJ told me if I want to make the NBA, I got to be a better defender. That's why I picked Iowa State, which was, he's a really smart kid. Like he's a very intelligent guy, and he understands what he needs to do to get better. And it's defense and rebounding. He's gonna shoot it. Like the guy is a great shooter, and 45% has been awesome. And he's doing it on a pretty high level of volume too, which is great. But I agree, C-Dub. I think if Iowa State wants to reach that like stratosphere that's even a step above, if he starts doing 15 points a game, look out, because you know what you're getting from Keyshawn and Curtis and those big guys. Joshua Jefferson's been a revelation the last 2 weeks. And
he just does it so quietly too. It's like, he has 8 assists.
The great thing with this team is like, who's the best player? And it's like, well, what do you want exactly? And and thank you for mentioning Heisey. I don't think in a weird way, it's almost like that rotation is like Heisey's the closer. Like you bring him in to guard and rebound to close out games when you have a lead. And actually, I think him and Milan.
Yeah, sometimes you don't need the closer.
Yeah, you don't need the closer. Like sometimes you just got to get some stops. And I thought, good example of why Iowa State's so good is this week when you go to Colorado, you shoot horribly, 4 of 18, and you still win by double figures. And it was Heisey that closed that game out. And then in here, it was Iowa State shot a lot better, and it was the 3-point shooting that put that thing not even in contention late. So many ways to beat other teams, and I will say this though, C-Dub, after this Utah game, which Cyclones will be an 18 to 20 point favorite on Tuesday night.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I was looking at that too.
It is. The next 3, I think it's the toughest 3-game stretch of the season coming up.
All right, let's pull it up here.
And it's sneaky hard, and you're gonna you're going to get everything you need in all three of those games.
So the stretch you are referencing would be at Texas Tech,
Terrifying.
Kansas at home
Yep.
on a Wednesday,
Yep.
and then at West Virginia. Who are they the biggest surprise in the Big 12 so far? Would they be it?
Yes. Especially
That's who I would have.
especially with Arizona with a huge win yesterday, beating Cincinnati on the road. I mean, I think Arizona's a team that's like, if they start figuring it out.
I got
they
my
some guys.
credentials applied for that game. I'm
Yeah.
doing it.
Well, that's
I'm going to that one. Big Monday,
27th?
iconic arena. Yeah, I'm going.
I'm efforting if I can get my wife on board to let me go.
I'm doing Kansas. I'm doing it. Honestly, it's like done this for 20 years, and all the things we're talking about with like legit Final Four, like we need to be. This is when Cyclone Fanatic needs to shine.
For sure.
We need to be at these places.
And that's one of the reasons, like on the football side, why I try to get to as many road games as possible this year, because I thought, man, this could be a year where you get to play in the Big 12 championship. And Iowa State did, so I'm glad I got to experience that. I have similar feelings with this team and the historic nature it could be. And you start talking about being able to go to Lawrence, going to Houston, going to Tucson. Holy cow! And I know I have some friends going to West Virginia. That's going to be an electric atmosphere as well there in Morgantown.
Even Arizona State and Arizona, that swing
that's
is
gonna be fun. And
there's going to be a ton of Iowa State fans.
Yeah,
at those
we're
games.
not going to do anything formal from like a trip, C-Dub, but we might try and do a pregame gathering there in Tempe, by the way.
I'll be at that one as well.
All right. FYI.
I think I might sit. Yeah. I'll be at that one as well. Yeah. The home schedule for Iowa State isn't great. You have Kansas. Other than that, you have Utah, Central Florida. You're looking at a 20-point favorite in both of those games.
Yep.
Kansas State, which will be fun for obvious reasons, but it's like you're going to be a 15 to 20-point favorite in that one.
Yep.
TCU, you're close to a 20-point favorite in that one. Cincinnati's pretty good.
Yeah, did not play well at all yesterday. That was a disappointing loss for them.
Colorado, 20-point favorite in that one. Arizona, which is that's a fun game.
Yep.
Never been there. That's a sexy game. And then BYU, you're a 15-point favorite in that game. So
fun fact: you said Arizona played in the first ever game at Hilton Coliseum. You know that?
No shit. I would have never guessed that.
And do you know
Good
stat?
Do
you know who the point guard was for Iowa State?
Eric Heft.
Beat him.
I know my Iowa State history.
They beat those Wildcats that day. Eric Heft setting the table.
Isn't that the old college basketball was great? The non-conference games.
Yeah,
people would just play everywhere.
They play everywhere. It's like,
yeah,
let's go.
They did play at everybody.
No,
it was amazing.
Chris, you're right. There
going to be 15 to 20-point favorites in every home game.
There is 2 games where Iowa State's going to be a single-digit favorite. Everything else is going to be double digits. Like
Kansas and Arizona, right?
Yeah.
And that probably is aided by Arizona's win. It may have been double digits prior to yesterday.
Yeah, I was surprised Iowa State was favored by 9 yesterday, and they made that look silly.
Speaking of that, though, so like, if you're out there wondering how do you know that, right? Like, so the metrics, right? We talk about this, and it sounds geeky, but it's how Vegas comes up with these numbers. And Iowa State right now, so like in football, it's the S&P, right? Like where you ranked offense, defense, special teams, trajectories, all this stuff. In basketball, it's really 2 numbers that they look at. It's adjusted offensive efficiency, adjusted defensive efficiency, and tempo. We're going to look at tempo when it comes to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's
and Iowa State's in the top 10 in both right now.
Right, it's points.
So the metrics love Iowa State is the point.
Here, to that end, Iowa State and Duke are both in the top 10 in offense and defense on the KenPom, and this is how all this stuff is derived. The last 2 teams to finish the year in the top 10, last year the team that finished in the top 10 in both was Connecticut. What did Connecticut do last year?
Natty.
And then the year before, Connecticut also was in the top 10 in
Natty.
both, and they won the Natty. So it's a really good indicator. The metrics are falling in line with what the eye test says for Iowa State right now. That said, C-Dub, I won't know everything I need to know about this team until it loses a couple of games. or at least
Yeah,
a game,
yeah.
because you're
Well-
gonna go through it. You're not, you guys. If Iowa State goes 20-0 in the Big 12, I will get a tattoo of Williams on my leg. It's not gonna happen.
Can you say that again?
If Iowa State goes undefeated, I will get a tattoo of your bald head on my leg.
Didn't you? Oh, okay. I thought you said if they went
20-0.
18-2,
No, 20-0.
20-0. Okay, yeah, they're not going 20-0, but that would be hell of a deal if they did.
It'd be a good deal. Yeah.
It would be a great tattoo, right? Like, wouldn't you get that thing with pride?
Wouldn't need a whole lot of surface level for the hair.
I'm just checking into this is really geeky stuff, but our audience eats it up. Because Iowa State's only loss is obviously to the best team in the country, arguably, to Auburn. Auburn has since that their only loss is to Duke,
Yep.
who's the number 2 team. We're going off of Ken Palm. There's
Yeah.
there's all the other rankings.
No,
and
don't
stuff
look at
too.
anything else. No.
Yeah.
don't look at-
And then I was just curious because you said, how do you bounce back from a loss? Well, Iowa State did that in Maui, a game you called. That Dayton team we think is pretty good. They have 2 losses since their loss to Iowa State.
Yeah,
they lost to Cincinnati
They got
on a neutral
destroyed.
floor.
They got destroyed yesterday. It was bad.
Yeah, that one was quite shocking to me. They lost to George Washington by 20.
Yeah.
But they're still in the driver's seat to be a tournament team. We'll just keep an eye on that. Doesn't really matter. Just checking in on some of these games that Iowa State played earlier in the year. But again, like when you look at your resume, it's like, well, who'd you lose to? Well, okay, Auburn by 2. It's like you hit a couple of free throws, and that whole thing is completely different. And they are. I looked too. I think 6 in the net is where Iowa State
Okay.
is. So all the metrics are
Well,
right where you want to be.
and then, C-Dub, I'm just looking here, and I know there's 18 games left in the conference, so a lot of stuff can happen. If Iowa State goes, let's say, an average season in the Big 12, right? 12-8. Okay, let's just go 12-8 in the Big 12. It'd be very average. I think people would be disappointed with that. With Iowa State's work in the non-conference, that's still probably a 2 seed, right? I mean, so you have put yourself in this position where you really have to stumble to not get a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament at this point. You have done the hardest part, and I know the hard part's the conference schedule.
Well, especially
But
when
we just
when
talked
we're
about-
looking at these spreads,
Yes.
like these lines that Iowa State's going to have at home.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Like you would have to have a couple shockers to. So you start projecting of, man, Iowa State was a 2 seed last year. They're right. They're in a better shape now than they were a year ago at this time.
February
aspect.
3rd is the date I have circled because I think between now and February 3rd. So you have Utah, which is they've lost
got
3 in a row.
Well,
I-
they've got these twins or these brothers, the Madsen brothers, and they just shoot it all the time. And if they run into 15 threes, then it could be an interesting game.
All right. Well, I'm not going to disrespect our friends at Utah. We'll count them. But after that, so you said the 3 after that, and I agree with you. But then it goes, you have Central Florida at home. You should win that one, right? 20-point favorite in that game. But then the Arizona swing is kind of tricky, right?
tricky.
Like,
Yeah.
would you be happy right now going 1-1 on the Arizona swing?
I wouldn't be happy, but I'd be content.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
what I'm saying here is like what. All right. Well, what about the swing of Arizona, Kansas State at home, at Kansas? What are you shooting for? 2-1?
Yep.
Like I'm breaking this thing
Yeah.
into little chunks here.
Yep.
After you go to Kansas on, let me put it this way: between now and the Kansas game, you have quad 1 games at Texas Tech, Kansas at home, at West Virginia, at Arizona State, at Arizona, at Kansas. After that, you have 2 quad 1 games the rest of the schedule.
Huh.
So I guess my point is by February 3rd, I think we're going to know,
Great point. Yep.
is this team like like we think it is? We will know in the next month is my point.
Well, and we got to reassess. The Big 12 has been so good the last 4 years. It's not as good this year.
No, it's not. I'm glad
Right.
you said that.
Well, and you just have more teams, and like we've talked about all along here. The more teams will dilute the numbers,
Yes.
and that's definitely showcasing here, and that is what it allows. That's why I was going to be favored by double digits several times at home. You would go. I bet if you go back, C-Dub, the last 2 years, even at Hilton, Iowa State would be single-digit favorites in conference play more often than double-digit favorites. So it's two-pronged here. So Iowa State's really good this year, and then the bottom half of the Big 12 just isn't as good. Now, those teams could get better, but I'm with you. I think we'll know, really know if Iowa State's a one-seed contender come a month from now, which is pretty cool. But at the very least, I guess the really good news here is I don't see a world, unless the wheels completely fall off and there's injuries and whatnot, how you're not a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament at this point, which is pretty cool when you've done all this work already and you're not even halfway through the season.
I want to thank our friends at the Iowa State University Foundation and tell you about SHOP, S-H-O-P. It's run by Iowa State students for Iowa State students. It is a student, basically it's like a food pantry. Brent, 31% of Iowa State students are food insecure.
That's crazy.
And
Good
SHOP helps fill that void, which is a really cool thing that they do. So every gift to SHOP helps provide just basic needs for students who are on campus. Check them out at movewhatmatters.com. Isn't that a wild statistic that they gave me? It's really sad.
I would not have guessed that. I remember during COVID when I was up there that was a huge emphasis, was to help out the guys and gals, specifically from overseas. A lot of them that they can't go back home. And they needed some food.
Okay. We think Iowa State will handle Utah, and then this Texas Tech game. Full disclosure, I don't know much about Texas Tech. I have not watched them much. Where are you at on that? Because that is a coin toss. Up until this weekend, Iowa State was actually projected to lose that game.
Yeah, I think they're going to be really hard in Lubbock, as always. Darian Williams is one of the best players in the conference. You'll remember him because he visited Iowa State as a portal guy, and Iowa State thought they were going to get him.
Yeah.
Do you know who the secondary plan to Darian Williams ended up being?
Keyshawn, right?
Curtis Jones.
Oh yeah. Okay. They had already had Keyshawn.
They already had Keyshawn. Yep. So
there's a lot of transfer portal guys we've reported on in the last 5 years.
Yes. Speaking of Curtis, real quick, because this news came out this week, and I want to address it from what I know. So more nonsense with the NCAA, and it's not their fault, but lawsuits are going to allow, if you play your JUCO years will not count against your NCAA eligibility any longer until something else comes out for that. So Curtis played at Indian Hills Community College during the COVID year. This is where it gets tricky. He's technically using that year right now, that COVID year, because everybody got one. So the question is, does the JUCO year count in addition to that, or does the COVID and the JUCO year happen at the same time? If they give him that year, he could potentially be back next year, which would be like getting a 5-star plus transfer back on your team. Like, it would be a monster. Like, literally a game-changing potential for Iowa State next year. I still, based on what I know, and Iowa State doesn't know this either, by the way, because they need a waiver of some kind, I am less than 50% that Curtis would be able to play next year, just from a ruling standpoint. I understand it. Like, if it was a JUCO only and the COVID year wasn't a part of it, then he's good. If it was just the COVID and not the JUCO, then he'd be fine. But it's the COVID year for him was his JUCO. So in my opinion, the way I read it, he won't have another year, but we'll hope for the best. And so that unfortunately we won't know that until the year being done. So just stay tuned. We'll keep you updated. If Iowa State could get Curtis Jones to return, my goodness, that would be awesome. I think he's a potential NBA guy, the way he's been playing lately, too. So he might have a decision to make as well as an older guard of what he wants to do.
But it's not as easy as it used to be.
It's not.
Because, like, a lot of these guys can make more money coming back and playing another year in college compared to the G League or overseas.
Oh, he would make more in college next year than he would make overseas and or in the G League. And not even close. Now, the question is that NBA guaranteed money, still pretty good. But a guy like him, though. He is. A guy like him, guys, like the way it's going with revenue sharing, and we're gonna have to recalculate this, and I'm hopeful that these contracts will start to be more public, and it's just kind of part of the conversation. Like, oh my gosh, look, you're looking at a guy like that at $1 million, probably, honestly.
Yeah.
Now, that's probably his value. What will it
Yeah,
take to keep him?
yeah.
I don't know. But you're right. You're starting to talk about these higher end basketball players. With the revenue sharing coming up, they're all going to be in the upper six figures. It's going to be hard to get a good player in the transfer portal in particular for under $500,000 going forward.
Welcome to 2025.
It's the way of the world, everybody.
Back in the day, it'd be like
Can you
kid
imagine?
was on a visit and you were afraid to buy him a hot dog if you were like his uncle. Oh,
yeah.
he's a prospective student athlete and I have student tickets. It's crazy.
But now, that's going to be $500,000 would be a bargain in this upcoming transfer portal market.
2 other notes I had from the Baylor game. One, Lipsy finally looks like himself, like consistently. We've been trending this way, obviously, but he looks. I don't know if I'd ever say Taman looks healthy, but he looks a hell of a lot better than he did out in Hawaii.
We were watching the Colorado game together when we were in Florida, and we both said, "Can he have a game where he doesn't hit the floor so hard?
Oh.
It just feels like he gets hurt every game."
I always think Taman's hurt.
He's gonna get hurt, yeah.
And then he always just pops up slowly, but he does. He's moving better. God, he makes so many. Otts talks about this a lot, like winning plays that maybe don't show up, just little deflections. I mean, crazy the amount of deflections basically him and Keyshawn get are incredible.
Yeah, and
on the perimeter.
Just watch Taman on offensive rebounds. Like the guy is just he's a nuisance. He just tips
He's like you to Iowa fans.
Yeah. If he could make that open three, because they're going to start leaving him open more.
Yeah.
But the one he buried yesterday was huge.
Oh,
because it's like
huge.
they dared him to shoot it, and he made it anyway.
And then the other one, and this is going to become a theme, I think, with the fan base, where everybody we loved him early, but he didn't play great early. It took him a while, but Chatfield now,
Yeah.
You got 2 Big 12 games in a row where he's really made an impact, and he is the guy who, you got like this roster full of just like thoroughbreds, and then you got the dog coming off the bench. I loved Chatfield the first time I saw him because I was like, that's closest thing we've had to Jared Holman as far as an enforcer.
Going now? We got the goatee, yeah.
I was like, this is my kind of guy. But again, like what it tells me though, in all seriousness, like fans love him, and I thought that they would, and this is going to become a theme where he's going to be the guy who's getting like a standing ovation just because of how hard he plays and all that stuff. But it's just the versatility you get if how many games where it was just like, well, if Big Rob Energy is in foul trouble, or if he decides to go 1 of 8 from free throws, or where you just had nothing else. Like, I mean, that was it. He better not get into foul trouble. And now it's like you got 3 dudes, and he doesn't have the ball skills that Jefferson does, but he's got he's a pretty competent replacement for Deshaun Jackson when
absolutely.
Deshaun's not in there, and he makes their life easier because they don't have to play as much, and then they can just be so much better. Like it's this just this other aspect of it, and you're not going to need 5 offensive rebounds from him every game to win. Just a cool little side deal though, that and he's getting better, and he's going to be better in February 5th than he is now. And it just gives another layer to this team, which is great.
Good reminder with him of the first couple of games. Don't judge everything. Him and Heisey both. I'd say Chatfield is the Colin Newell insurance agent of this Iowa State basketball team, where it's just like he's good. He's there. You don't always want him. You don't always think about him, but he's always going to be there, and he's going to do his job and do all the hard work. I thought defensively he's been great, and if he can make a layup and a free throw, man, he's been such a valuable piece, and it's been the same thing since he got on campus. Just a great dude, works hard, and he is loving life right now because this is why you come and play at Iowa State, is for big games like this. So excited for him, but man, you're right. It allows foul trouble difficulty for those other 2 presidents. That's what it does, and so those guys can play a lot harder and not have to worry about, don't try and chase down that block because I might get a foul here. And it just makes Iowa State so much better to have that versatility of being able to bring a big in. And that's, look at Jackson's minutes. Like, he's averaging 19 minutes a game. Deshaun Jackson is. Like, they've been able to keep him fresh, and it's going to help you then, C-Dub, not only now, but I was just looking at the schedule today. There is not a bye week, on the schedule. Like, you got 2 games a week. Like, this is going to be brutal physically, and it's nice to have a couple extra big bodies.
Let's thank our friends at Kelderman Manufacturing and then get into our Wiffles Hybrids Big 12 segment. Jeff Kelderman, Mark Steck, huge Vikings fan. It's Mark Steck. I hope he has a good Monday. I hope we're all celebrating on Monday. Kelderman.com. Check out the Kelderman YouTube page for all the cool stuff that they can do as far as their custom vehicle stuff. They do a lot of great work with diesel trucks. Kelderman's done it for like all these like freaking like country singers and stuff. Like it's badass what they do down there in Oskaloosa. A bunch of other stuff as well. Wiffles Hybrids, plant your independence. They present the Big 12 segment each and every week here on the Williams and Blum podcast, Sundays and Wednesdays.
That's right. And
we've kind of hit on this as far as the Big 12 basketball season has gone. You mentioned Kansas, and it's just so true. Kansas, they lose the Big 12 opener to West Virginia at home, and it's panic mode. They won at Central Florida 99-48. That is not a mistake. They doubled up Central Florida, and we've learned this, man. Like, I remember back in the day, when they had their streak of Big 12 championships, and we always wanted to pick against them. It was like, Travis Ford, he's got this Oklahoma State team. They're ready to go this year. This is their – and Self's teams always bounce back. That this one will too. What's your take on Kansas after the first week?
So that was more what I expected from them. I didn't watch much of that today, but UCF was completely outclassed from the get-go. Bill Self is as good as it gets. Whether we like him or not, the guy is, I think between him, Sampson, and honestly, I'm TJ's starting to get in that conversation. 3 of the best coaches in America because he gets good players to play hard, and that is a skill that his compatriot over there in Manhattan doesn't have, and that's what separates the really good coaches from the great coaches is you get good players to play hard, and that's what Kansas does. They're going to be a factor. They're going to be all the way there, and that's a good right game for them. That game in Hilton next Wednesday, that's going to be a tough one. It really is. Because you look at Kansas still, C-Dub, they still have Hunter Dickinson, and that's something that nobody else has. And I'm glad Iowa State has size this year to.
Well, that's my deal. Iowa State's in a much better spot to counteract that this year.
100%. But they're one of those teams. They're pretty streaky. If Mayo is making shots, they can be really good. I don't love their other offensive options, but apparently today all went well for them.
Last one I wanted to pick your brain on. Is Cincinnati good? Because they had a great non-con. Great relative, right?
Yeah,
like they beat Xavier, they beat Dayton. Their one loss was to Villanova, a true road game. And they were ranked. And then they've started the Big 12 with a loss at Kansas State, which Kansas State's probably a little bit better than what people think. I would guess.
I thought, they had a bad loss. K-State did to a very average TCU team, but K-State's not horrible.
They're better. They had a lot of drama and shocking, right?
Yeah,
a lot of drama in the non-conference. They're gonna get. I think they'll be okay. And then the lost Arizona. I just don't know. This is a weird team. I think they may have been overrated after the non-conference. Would be my read on Cincinnati. Do you have a read on them? Was the other team I wanted to ask you about?
Very, very streaky three-point shooting team. I think they're great defensively, and they rebound the hell out of the ball. They just struggle to score. Skillings is great. I think he's a great player. Jizzle James, when he's hot, is a nice offensive piece. But otherwise, it is a struggle for them offensively. And, Chris, they remind me actually a lot of Iowa State, a couple of years ago, where They're going to
Yeah,
grind
good
you.
point.
They're going to grind you down. Do they have enough against the really elite teams? Probably not. But they're going to win some games at home, and they're going to get in a couple slugfests on the road where, they turn you over 18 times and they make you, they out-rebound you and make it ugly. But they're an NCAA tournament team, yes, absolutely. They're probably a 5 or 6 seed. I mean, they're that good, but they are not. They are not in the Iowa State, Houston, and then I'm putting Kansas as a 2A stratosphere there.
Bloom, I appreciate you. Shorter pod this week. We want to get to this Iowa State women's game, which is about to tip off, and then we will be back on Wednesday. I know the Let 'em Cook guys are going to have some good stuff for you. And just a reminder, too, we're doing these pre- and post-game shows for every men's and women's game, okay? Chelsea Poppins is contributing for us this year, one of the all-time greats. Leah Nelson is an amazing host. And so we really want to make this part of your Cyclone game day, just each and every 30 minutes before tip and right after the game.
Can I give you a couple stats before we park the car for this
Absolutely.
evening to get everybody excited? Iowa State right now has the 5th best odds to make the Final Four. Iowa State now 3-1 to make the Final Four. Even better, Iowa State has the 4th best odds to win the whole thing. And it's Auburn, Duke, Tennessee, Iowa State. Iowa State at 12-1 to win a national championship.
Wow.
It's not just us, everybody. It's not just the Kool-Aid here on the Fanatic Podcast Network.
I feel different too. Like there's times where we've done this in the past where with any Iowa State team, and it's just like, I don't know if we want to go that far. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like that with this team. I just think they're that good.
I'll put it this way: Iowa State has all the pieces that it takes to win a national championship. It's a crapshoot still, but the pieces are there if things break right, and you're going to have to string some things together. We all know this, but I've never felt from a roster standpoint 1 to 9. Iowa State been in this good a shape since that 2000 team, and I think this team's deeper than that one.
Well said. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the weekend. It was special to have all those guys back. We appreciate our presenting sponsor, Mechdyne, very much. Everything they do for us here at Cyclone Fanatic in the Wild Rose Casino Studios, as always. He is Brent Blum. My name is Chris Williams. Have a great week. We will be back on Wednesday. We'll recap Tuesday night's game. Hopefully some football news at some point, a couple visitors coming in. We're reporting on that on Cyclone Fanatic Premium. You can go read that now. For Brent Blum, I am Chris Williams. Have a great week.